Hey everybody, ROTL UK, Matt and Ant with Peter from the UK Packers. We are just setting up here, getting ready to go for the show. Hope you've had a good week so far. It was only yesterday that we saw you breaking down the Atlanta Falcons game, so we hope you had a good day, I guess. And it's very rare that we do back-to-back shows.
No, we're on day four. We're on back to back to back to back, and we've got three to go. It's seven. It's 7 for 7, and we're on day four. So
There
yeah,
we
please
go.
don't get bored of us. We're trying.
Peter, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Really glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And clearly the NFL didn't take your schedule into account when it was setting its own schedule. You guys doing 7 shows on the trot.
Well, when we've got some passionate college fans as well, that doesn't help. And I know that you know all about that because you're the draft guide writer, aren't you, for UK Packers? Yeah. So we talked to you during the draft, I remember, and yeah, well, we'll get into that later when we're recording, but. It was good. You were one of our best guests, I think, of that whole weekend. So thanks again for doing that.
Appreciate
It's
that.
great to
It was
have you
good.
on.
It was good. It was good fun. Thank you.
Yeah,
How
we're still having to adapt to the been a good team schedule where you've got primetime games. We're not used to this.
No, we didn't
This
have
is
a
the
single
first.
one
This
last
is
year.
this is the first time since we started doing this podcast where we've had to deal with this. So it's like, oh
Yeah, I
God,
think
what the hell do we do with all these short weeks and Mondays? And I don't know how other teams do it, but
And
you'll learn.
and then you have extra when you're in the playoffs.
Well,
yeah,
when
maybe.
touch wood, touch wood, touch wood. That'd
Yeah,
be weird. Yeah, because it's weird. I was just saying that it's like usually now on like the college product, we're looking at prospects and stuff. I'm not even thinking about it at the minute because this team's actually good this year, so I don't know what we need, and I'm not really that fussed at the minute about the draft. It's just nice to have a season that matters for now.
Worry about it in February.
I'm worried about this game. God, we've just been talking about me and Matt. We are both incredibly nervous.
Well, I think it's one of those games, particularly early in the season, where you kind of start to get a feel for what your team is and perhaps what some of the other teams are. But right now, you can't be 100% certain what it is you're seeing, and I think that makes it, um, yeah, a more of an unknown. And I think in this particular instance, I think with the Lions, to me, still being the clear favourites in the division, I actually think this is a bigger game for the Packers than it is for the Lions. Um,
See, the way we think of this is our we've won at Lambeau the last 2 years, but it's not really meant anything. Like now that it means something, and now that you've got to play for something, it's like, can you do it? It's two different types of pressure, really.
yeah. It meant something to us
So,
last year in terms of stopping you getting
oh
in. It
yeah,
didn't mean anything to us really in terms of tangible progress for us. This is the backup to it. You know, last year melts away in terms of beating you if we lose this game. So yeah, worried. But we should have all this chat on the audio pod. So maybe just transition to college for a little bit. Have you been watching college football so far?
yeah, I have, and for me, barring the odd upset here and there, this is a typical college football season. First 2, 3 weeks of 4 weeks of the season, where you now at this point, when the conference games start, you start to get into the real the bigger games, and I think that's where it gets, for me, certainly it gets more interesting. And early in the season, with my draft hat on, it tends to give you an opportunity to look at some of the smaller schools, albeit they're playing the bigger schools, but you get the opportunity to see more of those teams than perhaps you would later in the season when you're concentrating on those bigger games. So that's always interesting. But yeah, I mean, right now it's difficult to know who's going to come out on top on this college season. Long way to go, and some of the teams at the very top, take Georgia, um, have not impressed, but you know they haven't yet played anybody that's going to push them too far. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Then you've got teams like Ohio State who had high hopes, who I take it, and is this correct, looked awful against Notre Dame but got the win.
yeah.
Yeah.
Peter's right. No one's looked good at this moment in time. My prediction of a Texas, Washington, Penn State playoffs is actually looking pretty good because they're three of the better teams at the minute. So,
And
there's
Yeah, and I think that Quinn Ewers at Texas is one of those guys. I won't say he went under a radar coming into this season, but when people talked about the top quarterbacks in college football, everybody thought of Caleb Williams and Drake May and Michael Penix, and Penix has been good. But Quinn Ewers was kind of not talked about perhaps in that upper group. He's good. It's very good.
And if I remember rightly,
class?
it was him. He got injured, didn't he? Was it Alabama last year where they were going to beat him and then ended up losing in a nail biter? And the way he played in that game kind of solidified to me that he's a damn good quarterback. And so he the one that redshirted somewhere and then transferred to Texas, and then Arch Manning's come in,
Ohio
and so everyone's
State.
waiting for Arch Manning to kind of succeed him, and that's why maybe he went under the radar a bit, is because he's not the long-term starter there potentially.
Yeah, and I would imagine because of that he'll come out, into the draft next year. A, because he's good enough, but B, because with Arch Manning sitting there, Manning's not going to, he probably may end up redshirting this year, but he's not going to sit on the bench next year. So I think this is the year for Quinn Ewers, and he's been good.
The quarterback class is fascinating this year because outside of the top two, there are loads of guys who are potential NFL starters here. Quinn Ewers is one, Riley Leonard, Cameron Ward, all these guys.
Oh, you're not going to say your guy? Come on, you've got to say your guy.
Everyone knows KJ. I love KJ. Jordan Travis.
Oh, you didn't just say
so
Jordan
many,
Travis. Oh, wow. Ash isn't even here.
But the thing is, there are so many NFL caliber quarterbacks potentially in this draft who are not Caleb Williams or Drake May or Shadur Sanders. And, it depends on how they come out. But this is the year to not be number one in the draft and need a quarterback, because you could get a ton of starters.
Yeah, and, I mean, the guy that I think's obviously Caleb Williams is the guy, barring any unforeseen circumstance between now and the end of the season. But the guy I really like is Michael Penix, who, if he didn't have his injury history, would be a surefire first-round pick. But you just don't know how teams are going to view a guy that's missed 60% of his career through injury. Does an NFL team see that as a huge risk? I don't know, and that's one of the situations that makes trying to predict a draft really difficult, because you're not sitting in an NFL team room knowing how they're thinking.
And it's getting the medicals and stuff, because
exactly right.
You had Carson Strong last year be basically a consensus third-round pick. Oh, but he's got chronic knee problems, and he goes undrafted, and then he goes into the USFL and then gets injured there with the Michigan Panthers.
Yeah.
So
he's not had it good, but Speaking of though these prospects from last year, one Puka Nacua absolutely killing things with the Rams, and your boy here was on him all last year. And Reed's balling out for the Eagles. It's like,
but you were higher on Nacua than everyone. You were talking about him as a high day 2 prospect, which basically no one else was.
He's great.
I hate the sweeping statements, because I heard the DLP, the Detroit Lions podcast, who are probably the biggest Lions podcast that happen over here. One of their guys said, "I'm not going to take all the praise for being on the branch train from day one, but I'll take 70% of it." And it's like, you and everyone else, like literally everyone was on the branch train. He was basically like a consensus top 15 pick who fell because he's a safety, even though he's not played safety at all in his career. It doesn't make sense.
And we need to thank Peter and the generosity of his team for making that possible.
Yeah.
And so I was one of those guys that wasn't on the branch train. So much so that yesterday I was really showing my age, because I spent half the day yesterday calling Brian Branch Benny Blades. Right, so obviously thinking back to when Detroit had a good team in the early 90s there. But yeah, I mean, I thought Branch would be a late first, early second round pick, just because of the reason you've described. It was difficult to work out exactly what his position in the NFL would be.
Yeah.
Because people had him at the top of the safety group. Well, he clearly wasn't a safety in the normal sense of the word, because he'd hardly played there. He's more of a slot corner or whatever you want to call him. So that was the difficult thing with Branch. But he showed up for 3 games.
I mean, he's basically been playing slot linebacker, which I guess is what the star role is in Alabama's defense, isn't it, really? Is that right? I don't really do college, but yeah. Okay. I thought Ash might have been coming, but maybe he was working, having to rush home. I don't know.
That was yesterday.
Dan just said in the chat, did the Lions jumping GB make sense to your guess? Did you like the trade down?
I think from the Packers' perspective, that they turned the picks that they got from the Jets, particularly the second round pick, as it went through the draft. Some of the guys that they ended up getting, like Carl Brooks later in the draft, they wouldn't have got without that trade down. So it worked. It worked for the Packers. They ended up with, Reed in round 2, who is going to be a good player and has already shown that has been a decent all-purpose type guy. He's going to do a lot of things for that team. So yeah, I mean, I really liked the Packers draft, even though they somewhat surprised me with the first round pick.
We'll get onto the draft in just a second because it's still so early on in the season. That kind of forms a larger part of the preview. So, also, there's a bit of chat in the live chat, Ant, about what you're drinking because it looked quite interesting.
I'm on ginger beer. I'm on nothing. I'm on nothing.
It might be the glass.
It's my Prague glass. I got this while I was over in Prague.
There we go.
Drinking lots of bit. No, I'm just on the ginger beer. I'm on the soft stuff today. I'm saving the hard stuff for the game on Thursday because I'm going to need it. My nerves are going to be shot by then.
Ash promised to do a shot for every touchdown we got on Sunday, and we only got 2, which was slightly disappointing. So I'm wondering if we can do something similar considering the start time on Thursday. But that could be disappointing too.
Should have done a shot for every sack.
That would have been good. Many thanks to Carlton Woods, who has tipped, I assume it's a conversion into dollars, $12.17, saying keep it going, Matt and Ryan, Steve and Tom. Thank you very much, Carlton. Appreciate you.
Who shots for subs again? That was the best way. That got me blindo.
Yeah, you were blottoed in the draft. You had to be subbed out.
I missed the last 20 picks of the entire draft because I had to go to bed.
Right, shall we get going on this?
Yeah, let's do it.
Pete, you ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Recording in progress.
Welcome to another edition of the Royal Alliance UK podcast, episode 219, Crazy Little Thing Called Love. My name's Matthew Turner alongside Anthony Fitzpatrick and our guest from the UK and Irish Packers, Peter Jones. How you doing, boys?
Doing good, thank you.
I'm doing really good, and thank you very much for having me on.
I'm delighted that you're here again, Peter. We had you obviously during the draft process, but for those that aren't into the draft or missed it, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself before we kick off?
Yeah, so I've been a Packers fan for more years than I care to mention, 40-something. And yeah, a huge NFL fan, huge Packers fan. And very early on as an NFL fan, I got into this thing called the draft, which, was quite different to anything that we have here. And so I've been, kind of doing stuff around the draft for many, many years. And I really enjoy it. And yeah, I've been to Lambeau quite a number of times. Been to both the Silver Dome and Ford Field to see the Packers play there, win and lose. Thanksgiving Day games. So yeah, just a huge fan. And it would be remiss of me not to give a shout out to my podcast home, which is the AVG Cheese podcast as well.
Yeah, please to go and
thanks for having me on.
Of course, anytime, Peter. Just going to do a little bit of preamble before we get into this. So, our Discord channel is going some, so you guys should come and join us for this Thursday's game. There's a link in the live chat on Twitch and YouTube right now. Come and say hi. You can chat with me and Ant and the gang all week long before the game, and then into the off-season we have some good fun talking about other sports from around the world too. College football podcast, Ant, is tomorrow. What are you talking about?
Yeah, so we're just going through our regular review of the previous week, week 4, and then we'll be looking ahead to week 5. As Pete mentioned, all the big games and conference games have started now, and there are a lot of frauds who need out in this week, and we are going to do that. So there's some teams who we're not happy with. But yeah, it's good fun. Come check us out.
Please don't forget to like the episode, sub to the podcast, and rate and review and all that good stuff. You know how it helps out small content creators like us, so much appreciated for you guys doing that. And please don't forget to add Lions Nation Unite on Facebook. That's Herman Moore's project to bring the best in Lions content creators together. You'll find us there, along with Micro Mike and Dose of Dion and all of your favourite Lions content creators. So lionsnationunite.com and facebook.com/lionsnationunite. We are Twitch affiliated and YouTube monetized, and there's a tip jar down below, like Carlton has just done. So thank you very much, Carlton, for that. If you want to show some love during the show, then that is very much appreciated. There's also a feedback form too. If there's any suggestions you have for the show, any content you'd like to see, any constructive criticism, then that's in the YouTube description. Please don't hold back. Right. Little bits and pieces of news coming out. Sam Laporta and Brian Branch and nominated for Pepsi Zero Sugar Rookie of the Week for their performances against Atlanta in week 3, and it looks like news coming out today that Dave Montgomery and Decker are trending up for Thursday for the Lions. Looks like they'll be playing, but so will Aaron Jones and Christian Watson for the Packers. And what do you make of the Rookie of the Week nominations? It feels justified.
Well, I'm really confused because, you know, all the Twitter draft experts said we had a terrible draft, so I kind of wasn't expecting anything from any of our rookies this year. But anyhow, as we know, Brad Holmes is great at what he does, and we love Branch. I mean, ever since he stepped foot in rookie minicamp before OTAs, he has just exceeded any and all expectations we had. You know, now that CJ is out, you know, we bought him in as a long-term replacement for CJ. If we weren't going to keep him, he's already doing that job. Like, he's already providing that presence you want in there, and just the maturity he's shown is incredible. And with Sam has been great as well. I mean, you know, I'm still a big fan of James Mitchell. And, you know, I thought Brock, given how much he's played in the team, I thought they would introduce him like slowly. He wouldn't get so many reps so early. But again, he's another who's just excelled all throughout the offseason and has come into this team, and he looks really, really good. His blocking's far better than what we saw on the tape in terms of like the run game blocking that was the problem. When we did that, he's been immense with that. He's done the down and dirty stuff, and now they're rewarding him, you know, with the deep throws down the field. They're scheming him open. They trust him. That big play he had the other day, like, the route was run perfectly, and to trust him in that situation is a big show of faith. So I'm not surprised. They are balling out. They are, you know, every player we draft now, there's a reason we do. They all have the same sort of identity, the same sort of mindset, work ethic, all that sort of stuff. And these guys just come in. They don't care if they're rookies. They'll come and make an impact. So I'm delighted, and I think they're both quite worthy of it. They're going to be big players on this team very quickly.
And Peter, that injury report for both teams was pretty long yesterday, but it looks like key players are going to be back for both sides.
Yeah, I mean, the Watson news surprises me if that happens. I was counting on Watson not playing on Thursday, given that he's not played to this point. Although they didn't practice yesterday, he was nominally a did not participate yesterday. So I've not seen the participation for today, but I'm still not sure whether Watson will play. Jones, I expect to play in a limited role. He was just about ready for Sunday's game, just gone. So it doesn't surprise me that Jones will play. And they need him, right? They need to supercharge that running game. But yeah, Watson would be a surprise and a bonus. So I think we have to wait and see on that one. I think it's interesting from the Lions' perspective, because I think that they've had some injuries on the offensive line, and I think if Decker's back, I think that's a huge plus for the Lions.
This is a big game. I think they're going to try. Both teams are going to rush as many players back as they can. I think there's a lot in on this game. So with us, Decker, Monty, you need them. The other guys, Watson, obviously back to your back. You know, you need it. You want them in the big games. I know it's a short week, but it feels like they're gearing up to have as many as they can, even if they are a little bit dinged up.
Yeah, I'll be very surprised if Bakhtiari plays. My gut feel there, and nothing really to base it on other than the kind of reports that everybody sees. My gut feel there is that he may sit out until after the bye week, and he may play the next game because they don't play until a week on Monday. So there's a long gap between those games, but I'll be very surprised if he plays Thursday night.
All right, we'll get into the long injury report in just a second. Packers preview now. So Pro Football Reference has the expectation of the Packers at 1.9 wins. They're obviously at 2-1, so slightly ahead of expectation, but barely. The betting for the game, Lions are 6-5 on, Packers are evens. Lions have a 1 point advantage on the spread and a 46 point over under. That's come in very, very slightly from when it opened. I think a half point towards the Packers and 1 point up on the over under. I think that's probably the Aaron Jones news, just slightly moving things. And Bakhtiari potentially looks like he's going to play as well. We'll come into that in just a sec. So, injury report was out yesterday. We haven't had today's one yet. All estimated, it was a walkthrough for both teams, having just played on Sunday. For the Lions, the estimation was that Vaitai, Ragnow, and Nelson did not practice. Ragnow is a vet rest day. We obviously know he's managing his toe issue. Limited practice for Jason Kabinda, Taylor Decker, Jonah Jackson, Kirby Joseph, David Montgomery, and Emmanuel Mosley. But Dan Campbell did say that it probably is going to come too soon for Mosley. We're not having any reps at all in preseason. And Kirby Joseph is going to be day-to-day, but Decker and Montgomery are trending in the right direction. The Packers did not practice. Jair Alexander, Zane Anderson, Devondre Campbell, Elton Jenkins, Zach Tom, Carrington Valentine, and Christian Watson. Limited Rashawn Gary and Aaron Jones, with Bakhtiari not practicing, but that was also a vet rest day. So, long list for both teams in vital positions, but today's the key day and we don't have it out yet because I'm guessing that both teams probably will have a walkthrough on Wednesday for the most part for Thursday's game. So this is the only day they're actually going to practice before the game.
Yeah, and certainly with the Bakhtiari situation, it's difficult because he's hardly practiced at all since the season began. So him not participating in practice is not necessarily an indication that he won't play. He pretty much doesn't practice. So he sat out the last couple of games with the swollen knee, the knee that was injured, 2.5 years ago. And I guess that throughout the season now, he's going to be a game day or a game week decision. I think he's going to play some and not play others.
The other name to mention, by the way, as well, is that Eric Stokes is on PUP still, your first round pick from 2 years ago, if I remember rightly. Yep. Sorry, Ant.
No, as I say, yeah, it's not ideal, but it's a short week. We got banged up the week before, so it's tough. But I think a lot of these guys will play. As I said, we've got a big gap until the next game. I think the only one I wouldn't expect to see Mosley. I mean, we need everyone to be on deck tomorrow. We need people to be able to carry a full workload, and to ask him to come in and do that, if there's injuries during the game or anything, would be too much. I think we need 53 guys who are 100%, not one who, with him, because he's not played for so long. I don't think you can risk it. I think you bring him in when we play the Panthers in a week, and then. But outside of that, if they can play, if they've got a shot, I think they will. I think there'll be a lot of guys who sort of tough this one out. Because again, we got a big break afterwards, and we can sort of heal up then as well. And quite frankly, we need to win this game. So I want as many of my best players out there as we physically can.
All right, let's have a look at the Green Bay starters, which obviously is difficult considering the number of injuries, but there we go. Quarterback Jordan Love, backed up by the rookie Sean Clifford. Running backs, Aaron Jones looks like he's going to play, but backed up by A.J. Dillon, Quadzilla himself. Wide receivers, Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs, and Jaden Reed, with Samori Toure and Dontavian Wicks back there too. Tight ends, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, and Josiah DeGuara. And then the offensive line. I mean, how you keep rotating in these late round draft picks and striking gold, I don't know. But Bakhtiari looks like he might play. Elton Jenkins, is he going to play? Don't know. Josh Myers, John Runyon, and Zach Tom, is he going to play? Don't know. But Rashid Walker has played very well. And you've got Sean Ryan and Josh Neiman back there too. It's a stacked lot of backups in there. And then on defense, starters of Kenny Clark, TJ Slayton, and Devontae Wyatt, backed up by Colby Wooden and Carl Brooks. Linebackers, or outside linebackers, of Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary, with Lucas Van Ness and Kingsley Anagbare. And then inside linebackers, Devondre Campbell, Quay Walker, and Isaiah McDuffie. And then the back four, Jair Alexander, is he going to play? Don't know. Rasul Douglas, Rudy Ford, and Darnell Savage, but there's also Keyshawn Nixon in there, Anthony Johnson, Jonathan Owens, Dalen Levitt, and then the kicker, Anders Carlson, and punter Daniel Whelan, both rookies this season. Peter, how are you feeling about that starting lineup when it's all fit and healthy? But here's that defense is, on an individual basis, absolutely fearsome.
Yeah, so let's start with the defense, right? So on paper, if they were all fit, healthy, 100%, now nobody ever is during the season, but if they were close to that, you've got a defense that potentially starts 8 first-round draft picks and 2 high-price free agents. So on paper, it ought to be a very good defense, if not a dominant defense. But we've been saying that for 2 or 3 years now, and that hasn't happened. Partly through injury, partly through, I think, scheme, right? And about being able to put the best players in the best spots to make plays.
We're very aware of Joe Barry, if that's what you're trying to say.
Well, and it's also about being able to get off the field when you have to get off the field, right? So, and they've, to be fair, for the most part this season, they've done that. So on third downs, which are the key downs, the defense has been able to get off the field most of the time. And conversely, the offense has converted a high number of third downs. So I think defensively, like I say, on paper, they're strong. The pass rush, the front seven is where the strength of this defense lies right now, particularly with Jair Alexander being probably out Thursday. We don't know whether he'll play, but my assumption right now is that he won't play. The front seven is where the strength of this defense lies. So this is a team that already has very nearly 80 quarterback pressures in 3 games. So you want to convert those pressures into sacks if you can. And Rashan Gary had 3 this past weekend in limited action. So he's been limited throughout the year, but in each of the successive games, he's been playing more and more snaps. And that outside linebacker stroke edge group is strong with Gary, with Smith, with Enagbare, with the rookie Lucas Van Ness. And what we're seeing is up front, we're seeing Devontae Wyatt start to be the player that they hoped he would be when he was drafted in the previous year's draft. So it took him basically a year to get to this point, but Wyatt's been good so far. And with TJ Slayton coming through, they've been able to move Kenny Clark to defensive end. And Kenny Clark's been more active in that role, which you would expect because he's not getting as many double teams as he was when he was on the nose. And Clark's been active as well. So that the strength is in the front seven, particularly with Alexander probably not playing.
And what do you make of the Packers offense?
The offense has been up and down, right? And it's the big issue with the offense is the running game. So they've just not been able to get the running game going. Not helped by Aaron Jones going out injured in week 1. The offensive line is one of the top-ranked offensive line in pass protection. But in terms of opening up holes for the running game, it just hasn't done that. And they have really struggled badly to run the football. So, across the board, they're averaging well less than 4 yards a carry. I think something like 3.4 yards a carry, something like that. And, there's been a number of plays that have been thrown for 5-yard losses and that kind of thing in the running game. And other than, like I say, Aaron Jones in week 1, they haven't broken off any long runs at all. Dylan looks like he's been struggling, but I think behind that offensive line, I don't think Barry Sanders would pick up a lot of yards trying to run behind the blocking that we've seen in the first 3 weeks of this season. Conversely, I think Jordan Love has shown himself to be what some of us thought he would be, right? Going back 3 years when he was drafted, but still a ways to go. So, and that's encouraging when you come out you go 2-1, you throw 7 touchdowns as opposed to 1 interception for you through your first 3 games. Been very careful with the football. Makes really good decisions. So I think that's the thing that's been outstanding. Needs to work on his accuracy and needs to work a little bit on the long ball. But I think if any Packers fan really held their hand up, he's been everything that we could have hoped for to this point.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
What do you think in a broad brush about the Packers starters?
I mean, there's a lot of good starters in there. Like we said, the defense is full of high-level draft picks who are starting to develop, and they've been keeping them in games this season where sometimes they've had no right to be in those games. This one at the weekend, for 3 quarters, they were terrible. The defense kept them in, and it just took a spark. And the offense, it's young. Like a lot of the guys are young. The receivers, the quarterback, in terms of his playing experience, kind of what we've been through as well. And you can see the growing pains that they're having in there in some regards. But then at the same time, you can see why they are, why they're there. Green Bay is a storied franchise that has been successful. It has developed players for years. You have to be very talented to play and succeed there, and you can see that with them. So, this starting team, it's very talented. There's just sort of one thing about it now that's been different to previous years to the Packers. And I liken this, and let me explain the analogy here. But for me, the Packers now, they're like the aliens out of Independence Day. So for years, like, we have not, let me explain.
Right, okay.
For years, we have been unable to do anything against. They have been this all-dominating force against us that have come and absolutely trashed us time after time after time, and whatever we've thrown at them, it's just not affected them. They have been superior to us. They've beaten us for the most part of this, and it's due to that intimidation factor they had about them that we just didn't, we couldn't win, and there was just absolutely nothing good going for us. But now, at this point in time, it just takes one genius to bring that shield down. We've got Brad Holmes, who's come here, and he's reinvented this team. It's young. It does not care about what's happened in the past. It has got this new mentality, this new attitude. Everything about it is completely different to the past. And now that shield that was protecting the Packers before, that intimidation factor they had over us, it's gone. We don't go to Lambeau anymore and feel intimidated. Obviously, even when it's down, you've got to fight like hell to go and beat that team. They're a good team. They just don't have the intimidation factor about it. And we've seen that we can go there and that we can beat them now. So they're still very talented, but we have the virus, as you would, to go in there and take them down finally and assert our dominance over them. So I've got great respect for this team. I love their drafts. I love a lot of the players they've brought to this team. Like I said, the late round picks they've had there, like Enikbari last year, Rasheed Walker last year. They're so good. They know what to do, and they are a highly formidable opponent. But I think we now have the tandem to take it down. So, but yeah, it's a good team, and we're going to need to be our best to beat them.
If I knew that you were going to make that analogy, I would have called the episode "Hello, Boys, I'm Back."
It is, though. Do you not think, for years...
I can kind of see it, yeah.
They've kicked our ass for years, but losing the intimidation factor is a big thing. I mean, do you not feel confident now that we can actually go there and beat them? I'm not saying that it's going to be easy, but for years we've gone to Lambeau and I've been like, yeah, we're going to lose this. If it's a Packers team with Rodgers, with that team, they're playing for the playoffs, they're going to kick our ass.
Even when we beat them in the game, we lose because of a Hail Mary or whatever. Like, if there's 1 second on the clock and it's a 1-score game, we're going to lose. Yeah, I felt that way for a long time.
And when we beat them, it's because they were resting everybody for the playoffs. And, it's like there's been no significant victory over them for some time.
Yeah, no, I buy it. I know what you're saying.
But now this young team, it went there last year when the Packers had something to play for, and it won. And it's now like, and it's because of how this team feels now. It knows it can go anywhere and win if it plays well. And what that does is it takes away the intimidation factor, which has been a thing for so long. with these guys. They don't care that it's Lambeau and they don't care that it's Green Bay. They know they are good enough to beat them, and it's not been that way for a very long time.
And I think that's an important. I think that's an important point because historically in the NFL, winning begats winning and losing begats losing, and losing teams find a way to lose, right? And a lot of that is because when it really comes down to it, they don't believe that they will win. And I saw a quote the other day, and I can't remember which team it was, where they talked about the general manager saying, "We're now coming into the building believing we can win." No. You need to go into the building believing you will win. And good teams do that. And I think that for the Lions, they proved that in week 1 of this season, right? Anytime you go into Kansas City and win, you've proved that you can do that. And those types of wins are the things that you fall back on when you're 7 points behind or 10 points behind in the fourth quarter of a game, because the team believes that you can come back and win. It will be interesting from a Packers perspective whether the comeback win this past weekend, coming back from 17 points with 11 minutes left in the game, has that impact on the Packers in terms of them believing that they can come back and win any game. Remains to be seen. But you're absolutely right, and let's not make any bones about it. This is a better Lions team than we have seen in many years. It is. It just is.
Yeah, reflected in the spread. You know, when Vegas says something, people need to take note. But the time when the team believes that they deserve it without going for it because they should just win is the time that they'll get stomped in the mouth, which is what happened against Carolina for us last year. We were marching somehow towards the playoffs, and then they just ran away with it. So that could happen in this game, and I'm fearing it that, you know, we might take this for granted a little bit.
And that's what I mean. It's like, this Packers game is not easy. Like, it's a very good... They have a great defense, and if we play slow offense like we have this year, they're going to punish that. Yeah. And if we can't keep the scoreboard moving and we get in a hole, they can punish that. And it goes back to the whole mentality thing. Because I know, like we talked about beforehand, this offense of theirs is younger than that, but Green Bay is a winning franchise. It's all rooted in the mentality of that franchise. It's their coaches, not just the players. These guys just always find a way to win or to get themselves out of a jam. And this is what we've got to prove, that we can go there and overcome it when it matters to us as well. So I am scared of it, because for me, this is our moment to say we are top of the NFC North now. We are the best team in the NFC North now. And we've not said that, well, since we've been alive pretty much, let alone us supporting this team. And it's a watershed moment. To others, it may just seem it's one game in a season, but it's not. This has big implications in terms of just everything about the mentality of it, and the outside looking in at it. It means a ton to us. And I am concerned that if we lose it, then it's like, oh, for the God's sake, for the 100th time, Green Bay have beaten us when it matters. And it's like, you just can't. And that's what I mean. They're these sort of invincible aliens that you can't get out the way, and then it just takes that one inspired moment where you eventually are able to take them down, and if you can't, you're just going to keep getting stomped on.
It's weird, isn't it? It's both a physical and mental thing. There's the mental aspect of, you know, losing momentum and can you do this, but also the physical aspect of getting an in-division win against the team most likely to challenge you for the division. You know, whichever team wins this, if they can win the reverse fixture as well, looking at the other two teams in division, that probably locks it up. Unless you absolutely ruin yourselves for the rest of the season, this game and the Packers-Lions game at Ford Field are the key games. Because if every team in this division really does poorly, whoever comes out 2-0 in that matchup might win the division with 8 wins. If the division really does badly. So I think either way, it's an absolutely crucial game. Let me get into the stats on both sides of the ball for Green Bay, and then we're going to talk about the off-season moves and the draft, and then we'll get into a little bit of the Saints-Packers review just to see how you did on Sunday before looking at key matchups. So, stats-wise, PFF has the Packers 73.5 overall, that's 15th. The offense is 66.3, that's 21st, and 74.3 on defense is 12th. On offense, we mentioned Jordan Love, 54 receptions on 96 throws, 53.1% completion rate, 655 yards, 7 touchdowns, an interception, 94.7 passer rating, 69.5 quarterback rating, also 14 rushes for 74 yards and a touchdown at 5.3 yards per carry. PFF grade of 65.3. Running backs at the moment because of injury led by AJ Dillon, 39 carries for 107 yards, no touchdowns as yet. That's 2.7 yards per carry for him. PFF grade of 62.3, which I guess is higher than you'd expect for someone going at less than 3 yards a carry, but I think to Peter's point earlier, that speaks to how well the offensive line have done for him, really. Aaron Jones is clearly the lead back, but just hasn't been healthy. He's got 9 carries for 41 yards and a touchdown at 4.6 yards a carry and a PFF grade of 71.3. Wide receivers led by the rookie Jaden Reed and the rookie from last year, Romeo Dobbs. For Reed, 9 receptions on 20 targets, 148 yards and 2 touchdowns, and PFF grade of 67.9. For Dobbs, 11 of 20, 129 and 3 touchdowns, PFF grade 76.6. For the offensive line, I mean, it's very much outside in. Bakhtiari, 78.3 grade on 55 snaps. Obviously, he's been banged up. Zach Tom has done exceptionally well too. PFF grade of 75. But the interiors where things, according to the PFF grades, have really struggled. Myers with a 54.2 grade at centre. Runyon, the guard, at 54.5. And Royce Newman, the other guard, at 51.7. So clearly much higher for the tackles and lower on the interior. In terms of efficiency stats, Peter mentioned it earlier, 20 of 43 on third down is 46.5%. That's 6th in the NFL. Converted 2 of 6 on fourth down, 33%, 22nd. And they've scored 7 touchdowns on 9 trips to the red zone, 77.8%, is 3rd in the NFL. That's a lot of stats, but the defense I haven't got much on, so I'll just do that quickly. Linebacker Quay Walker leads the team in tackles, 28 tackles on quarterback hit, an interception, a touchdown, 2 passes defensed, and a PFF grade of 74.1. Rashawn Gary has had an absolute barnstormer of a season, given the limited practice time he's had and injury. 5 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 5 quarterback hits, a pass defended, and PFF grade of 80.6. Cornerbacks, we know that Jair Alexander's been struggling with injury, but he's still got 2 passes defended and 8 tackles and a PFF grade of 62.5. Rasul Douglas has had a good season so far. An interception, 4 passes defended, a fumble recovery even. 14 tackles and a PFF grade of 78.6. And Darnell Savage has had a good season. 24 tackles, a tackle for a loss, PFF grade of 63. Efficiency-wise, again, as Peter said, great on third down. 13 of 42 is 31% allowed, which is 7th in the NFL. On fourth down, they've allowed 5 of 7, which is 71%, which is 24th. And 4 touchdowns on 9 trips to the red zone, so they really tighten their belt with a shortened field. 44% is 10th. Obviously gone through a lot there, but Peter, the grades only tell one side of the story, and I've only watched one game of the Packers so far this season. Offensive line-wise, do you think those grades hold true, that you're much stronger in the tackles than you have been on the interior this season?
Yeah, and I think that's true anyway, even without the grades, right? So I think the best 3 players on the offensive line would be Bakhtiari, Jenkins, and Tom. Jenkins is hurt. All right. I remember talking to you guys around the draft time. See, for me, Zach Tom, his future should be at centre, and he's the best centre on this roster. Unfortunately, he's also the best right tackle on this roster right now. So, yeah, but they're definitely struggling. You know, the centre position they're struggling at. They're struggling at guard, right? Particularly with Jenkins out. Royce Newman was the starter a couple of years ago at right guard, but he's struggled. And John Runyon, through 3 games this season, hasn't been as good as he has been previously. So they're definitely struggling on the interior of the offensive line, particularly, as I say, in the running game. So those PFF grades do not surprise me at all. What they have been able to do is they have been able to keep a clean pocket for most of the time for Jordan Love, which has been really, really helpful. But yeah, they've got to get the running game going, and that starts up front, and that interior of the line is struggling.
And the efficiency stats are kind of slightly worrying, because if there has been a weakness for this Lions team, some of it I think has come on third down, and it looks like that's where the Packers are pretty strong.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the Packers haven't put up huge amounts of yardage, either through the air and obviously not on the ground, as I've just talked about. But what they have been is super efficient, and they've converted a lot of third downs, and they've scored when they've got in the red zone. Whereas last year they were something like, and I don't remember exactly, but they were something like 22nd or 23rd in red zone offense, and that made a huge difference. So they've been able to score, and they've been able to score touchdowns when they get down in the red zone, and that's a huge difference. And I guess to a degree has covered up their inability to run the football.
And what do you make of all of this? The efficiency stats are pretty worrying, and Gary's on an absolute tear. He was a menace against the Saints.
Yeah, as I say, with their offense, you've always got to be wary of it. You know what the Packers are going to be. I know the offensive line has been struggling, but they always find a way to make it work. And obviously, not having Aaron Jones has hurt. You saw the first week against the Bears, they were struggling until they put it in his hands, and through the run and the pass, and then they just became a very dangerous team. But yeah, when you've got an efficient offense, it's always a worry. And I think the worst part of it is when you pair it with, it's not an elite defense yet, but when you pair it with a high-level defense that's not giving many points away, it doesn't take much to spark it. And they've got the firepower to still take you down. I worry, and we've had problems adjusting to this in the past. It's like when we played the Seahawks, we mentioned at tackle they were barren and they were going to struggle, and they adapted to that. They were putting the tight ends in there, they were putting the running backs in there, they were giving their tackles a lot of help, and we didn't adapt to this. And we know with Green Bay, the tight ends you have to block, the running backs you have to block. It's first and foremost one of the big things you have to do there. If there's a weakness that they think we can exploit, they'll patch the holes into it, and it's can we adapt to that? Because there's so many times I've seen us go to Lambeau and not get pressure on the quarterback, even when Bakhtiari's not played against us for a long time now. Like, he's been injured a lot of the times we've played, and they've still managed to make something out of it. So you've got to bottle them up, and you've got to bottle them up all game. Otherwise, they'll hurt you. And if you're not putting up points, it's still dangerous. So I do worry about it. And the more Love plays, the more comfortable he will get, because this is still his first games in the NFL, like serious playing. And each week it'll get a little bit easier. And I know he struggled a little bit, but at the end of the Saints game, he started making some throws, and you're like, well, the confidence has come in. The last thing you can allow him to do is to allow him to keep gaining that confidence, giving him the completions, and because then they'll hurt you. And if they run it well, they'll hurt you still. But thankfully for us, our run defense has been top this year for the first time in a very long time. We absolutely nullified the Falcons with it. So if we can do it again, if Aaron plays and we're able to keep him quiet, or if he doesn't, and it's Dylan, I think he's going to struggle a great deal against us, and that's when they're vulnerable, when you put it all on him. So I am worried about it. Yeah, I'm always going to be worried about a Packers team, no matter how bad they may appear on paper. I will always be worried about them and what they can do. But there's certainly, you can keep them a lot more quiet than you can without A-Rod in the building.
Talking about A-Rod not being in the building, off-season moves inwards, nothing particularly significant. Obviously out, Aaron did go in a trade to the Jets for a first, second, sixth, and what was a future conditional 2 that's inevitably going to become a 1, it now inevitably is locked in at a 2 now, unfortunately, for the Packers, although I guess potentially a high 2 rather than a presumably low 1, so maybe the difference isn't as pronounced as it might have been. So Rodgers goes, Lazard goes and joins him, 4 years, $44 million. Jaden Reed, can't remember his first name. Jaron Reed went to the Seahawks, so the edge player, 2 years, $9 million. Bob Tonyan moved on to his third NFC North team with Chicago, 1 year, $2.65 million. And then Mason Crosby, the kicker, and punter Pat O'Donnell were both let go. They're still on the open market, I believe. Draft-wise, huge number of picks, as Peter alluded to. Lucas Van Ness taking the 13 overall, the edge player from Iowa. Then they double-dipped at tight end at 42 with Luke Musgrave from Oregon State and Tyler Kraft at 78 from South Dakota State. And they... Tucker, thank you. What did I say? Tyler. Sorry. I put the initial one in name because I thought I knew what it was, but I don't. They sandwiched Jaden Reed from MSU, wide receiver, at 50. Otherwise, into day 3, you had Wooden, the defensive end from Auburn, Sean Clifford, the quarterback. I don't know whether you feel the same, Peter. We had a little bit of a giggle at that one at 149. I'm not sure how good he's been in camp, but maybe we'll get onto that in a minute. 159 in the 5th round, wide receivers Ontavian Wicks from Virginia. Carl Brooks, a defensive tackle from Bowling Green at 179. Kicker Anderson from Auburn at 207. Then into the 7th round, Valentine, the cornerback from Kentucky at 232. Lou Nichols, the third from Central Michigan, running back 235. Safety Johnson Jr. from Iowa State at 242. And wide receiver Grant Dubose from Charlotte at 256. So, I mean, how many picks is that now? 13 picks? Turned over your kicker and punter. I know that your special teams have not been amazing in the last few years, so maybe that's a reaction to that. I don't know. And then Sean Clifford shocked the world, I think. But Lucas Van Ness at the top and 2 tight ends, it really does make the youngest group of pass catchers in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think 11 of the 13 made the final 53, and I think that kind of is a huge reason as to why the Packers are the youngest average age team in the NFL this year. And they got help at the spots that they needed to get help. Tight end's been a position of needing young help for a number of years, right? So the Packers have not had a consistently high pass catching tight end since Jermichael Finley around 2011, 2012. So the best part of a decade. So that was a position they had to get help in. And that tight end group, as we talked about around the draft, there was 4 or 5 or 6 of those guys that whilst I wasn't keen on them in the first round, I think when you got to the 2nd and 3rd rounds, there was Musgrave, was Tucker Kraft that the Packers took. There was your guy Sam Laporta. There was a really nice group of tight ends there. And Musgrave has been good so far. It hasn't been dominant, hasn't had the number of targets or receptions that Sam Laporta's had, but it's been, pretty good so far. And so pretty encouraged by that. Van Ness at the top of the draft was an interesting pick. So he was 13th on my board and went 13th to the Packers, but I didn't expect them to take him. Just because I thought that there were other positions, as we talked around draft time, around Jackson Smith and Jigba. That was the guy that I wanted the Packers to take. That wasn't to be, although he was there when the Packers picked. But yeah, I mean, they've gone for, again, a defensive first-round pick, which seems to be par for the course over the last decade for the Packers, building up the number of number 1 picks on defense. But all in all, it was a very nice draft with some interesting picks, right? So Sean Clifford, that you alluded to, is one of those. Fully expected the Packers to take a quarterback in round 5, 6, 7. Absolutely. And we talked about that back in April. Absolutely thought that would happen. Didn't expect it to be Sean Clifford, I have to say. Now, what's interesting, he was one of the guys that the Packers had in for a top 30 visit. They absolutely loved his attitude. And preseason, what does the preseason count for? I don't know. Usually not very much. He was absolutely brilliant in the preseason. And my view on Sean Clifford right now, I mean, we've clearly not seen him in game action, and barring an injury that we hope never happens, we're not likely to see him play a lot of game action. The jury's out, because I don't know what he is. He wouldn't have, like I say, wouldn't have been my pick, but he was good. He was the reports out of camp were fantastic. And in the preseason, he was really sharp. But like I say, wouldn't have been my guy. The other interesting picks for me were the kicker, Anders Carlson again. Wouldn't have been my guy, right? But I fully expected them to take a kicker. So Mason Crosby's nearly as old as me. That's old, right? So it didn't surprise me that eventually that they were going to move on. I didn't expect it to be Anders Carlson. His record in college wasn't great as kickers go, kind of a 70% field goal guy. But he's been perfect in the few attempts that he's had so far during the regular season for the Packers, and has a huge leg, absolutely huge leg. So we're going to see how that pans out. Yeah, I mean, what else can I say? Colby Wooden surprised me only because I thought Wooden was a good player, but I wasn't sure because of his size whether he's a defensive end or an outside linebacker in the pros. The Packers have listed him at defensive end, and he's coming in that rotation, but he's not a big defensive end, so that one slightly surprised me. But all in all, thus far, it's an encouraging draft. You know, if you can be that encouraged about a draft after 3 games.
And obviously, you're a college and draft guy. What did you make of the ins and outs that they had in the off-season?
I mean, sorry, Pete.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was about to say, you can start to see a clear path there. So obviously, with the first 2 picks, Van Ness and Musgrave, you've gone physical upside, like physical attribute upside. Obviously, Van Ness has the potential to be an absolute superstar. Showed a bit in college. Obviously, never started a game, but he played plenty of reps there on a great defense. Musgrave has been injured for the most part, but he has the potential to be the best tight end of the whole lot by some distance if he gets healthy and he becomes what they think he's going to be. So they went for like the physical attribute upside with those guys there. And then, the further down the draft you go, there's just a lot of smart picks in there and a lot of value to be had with some of these guys. I love their picks over the last 2 years, but I mean, there's obviously some emphasis there. You've picked 6 wide receivers in the last 2 years. So you are, trying to fire as many shots as you can to get yourself you're building a young receiver core through the draft, which is good in this day and age when you're having to pay out, and when Justin Jefferson gets paid stupid amounts for wide receivers, it's going to be the next tackle position. It makes sense to try and build young through the draft. Obviously, you've hit with Watson when he's healthy. Daubs looks like he's coming good. You've added Jaden Reed in there, who's a speed guy, and even down to DeBose. I like to Charlotte. The more shots you take, the more chance you're going to land on here. And then you see with the D-line, you've already got a good D-line there in Green Bay. And then like last year, you got Enagbare at a stupidly low value. How he fell that far in the draft is one of the biggest mysteries of that draft. He had no right to be picked there, and the Packers pick him up there.
Was it 6th round or 7th round?
Yeah, I had it. I was mocking him at the start of the 2nd. Like, he was in that part of that edge. That's how good he was. It was just he got ignored on a South Carolina team that has not been very good for some reason. I don't know what it was. But then this year you get Carl Brooks, like so late in the draft. And Carl Brooks I don't know how he's doing, but for me, he has the inside-out versatility on that defensive line. So you are stacking it. You have a bona fide front 7 there with full of first-round picks and like really high-level talented players there. And then you're just even loading up the depth behind it to the point where this is how Green Bay love to play football, like the Bears of past years, and they've gone away from. It starts with the front 7. You win with the front 7. You can see what they're trying to do there. So overall, I kind of really like it. I like Tucker, obviously coming up from the FCS, but he's going to be another. This is building a team for the future. Like in 2 or 3 years, if a lot of these guys develop how they should do, then they are going to have so many dangerous weapons on offense, and they are going to be a real big force to be reckoned with there. So I love what they've done. And it pains me to say that with them being Packers fans. The only one that made me laugh was Clifford. It's like I had a good chuckle about that. He's been a ball and chain around that Penn State program for years, and now they've actually got a good quarterback there. They're going to go and win the Big Ten this year. So I just don't get why him. I don't get why him when there were so many other good guys there, but it's a backup quarterback. Who's there? I love what they did in the draft, and I'm scared of what they could be in a few years, some of these guys.
I mean, I still think Dorian Thompson-Robinson was available, and if you have a look at what Jordan Love does and what DTR does, I felt like that was a more natural backup than Sean Clifford, who might be a bit more of an Aaron Rodgers type of standing in the quarterback and can shift a little bit in the pocket and can throw it, but doesn't have the mobility. It feels like there's not a lot of similarity in there, Peter.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was absolutely a surprise, right? And clearly, the very fact that they had him in as one of the top 30 visits, clearly that visit went very well, and clearly there was something that they liked about him. from the outside looking in, it was surprising. And all I could say is at this point, he's done absolutely everything that's been asked of him, and that's
all you can ask for.
That's it. And,
yeah.
and time will tell. I mean, I think generally speaking, I think Packers fans should be really encouraged by the way that this draft class is looking. You mentioned the wide receivers, Reed, Dontavian Wicks. None of them is, blowing games away. They're not putting up 100 yards here or 150 yards there, but they're making nice plays, and they're making plays on third down when they have to have them. And it looks like a group where the ball's going to be spread around this group. So I'm not expecting, 100 catch receiver to come out of this group, at least not in the next couple of years. But if they all end up catching 50 or 60 balls apiece, that will that will do the job. And that's what it's looking like right now. And they're all slightly different as well. So yeah, it's certainly an encouraging place to be. And we've been talking for years about needing to restack, reload, whatever words you want, the wide receiver group. Well, they've done it. And as Packers fans, it's a young group and we have to be patient with it because they're going to drop balls, they're going to run some wrong routes, but they're going to grow together. And I think it's important, and I've said this in various places, I think with a young quarterback, it's important that wide receiver group grows up with the quarterback.
And you don't need any of them to be superstars. If Christian Watson turns into what he's going to be, then all you need is Daubs and these guys, 2 or 3 of them to be depth afterwards. And then you're at a position that's paid high and you're young. You're completely young and you can spend the money elsewhere. I completely understand the strategy with it. It's one thing we've not really done outside of Amon-Ra and Jamo was invest in draft receivers like a whole ton, like higher up. So,
well, and the beautiful thing about where the Packers are is they could finish around 500, and like you were saying about the quarterbacks in this class, with Love being on a cheap 1-year deal after this season, there's nothing to stop them taking a quarterback in the second round to give them some competition. So, there's enough people in here that even if Love doesn't work out, you can get cheap at that position again. Or, I mean, you've got the assets to even trade for someone. So,
yeah, they're not going that way, right? They're all in. Jordan Love's the guy, for better or for worse. This year, next year, they're all in on him. Now I think if by the end of 2024, if they've still got a whole bunch of question marks, I think that's a different conversation. But they're absolutely all in on him, and he's getting 2 years at least.
All right, let's move on.
In my view,
no, absolutely. You're the guy who should know. So we're from the outside in. Let's talk a little bit about Sunday's game. Obviously, you mentioned that they came back from
Oh, sorry, you mean there was
last week. Talk about last Sunday's game. So 17-0 with, I think it was 9 minutes to go when you got the ball back and run off 18 points and then fade a late field goal to secure the win. And just a few observations of mine, and I don't know if you have any other observations to kind of throw in for Peter here, but this is kind of what I saw generally and on offense, and then I'll go on to defense and special teams afterwards. So first, just a general observation. Everyone was slipping on the turf. Like, all the time, everyone slipped. And it was like, what is going on? Like, why aren't you wearing the right cleats, for goodness sake? So I really hope that the Lions have taken note of that and will wear the right footwear. On offense, first series had great field position around midfield and kind of shot yourself in the foot with holding and false start penalties. It was clear to me that Love was decisive with the ball, not scared to scramble, but wasn't trying to escape too early either. Had a trick play where he slipped on 4th down, had a player wide open, almost still made the pass, which was quite impressive, really. Seemed to kind of throw a bit of a wobbly ball when he felt under pressure a couple of times. It wasn't as accurate as when he had a clean pocket, and it kind of seemed to hang up in the air. The power sometimes in the throws seems to kind of be a bit lacking, and I mean, the wide receivers were so open it often didn't matter, but the ball just, I don't know if you've seen this, Peter, and I'll just run off all my observations, but the ball does hang up there a little bit for him, potentially. He had the miss to Musgrave up the seam for an almost 50-yard play, maybe a touchdown when he was wide open. It seemed you guys were trying to pass to open up the run rather than the run to open up the pass, which I guess speaks to your running troubles that you mentioned earlier. Musgrave used a lot in motion, seemed to kind of scheme him open, which worked very well. There was a really convincing play-action fake that Love did. Hand off to the quarterback and then kind of like looking away from the opposition, tucking the ball underneath. It didn't look like he had it. Everyone bites on it, and then he runs away from it and then throws a pass. I was really impressed by how well he sold that. There was a play action pass from the 45 that he threw into the end zone, but into triple coverage, and he still could have had his man if he'd had the juice on the throw. Seemed to struggle sometimes escaping pressure, or maybe not throwing it away when he knew that he couldn't escape pressure, because he's fast. So quite often, when he was decisive, he got away, and then sometimes he hesitated a little bit. When he tried to throw with power, it seemed like it took him a while to kind of wind up the arm, like he just kind of struggles with a bit of power behind it. A lot of that run game was struggling a little bit, especially in the interior. The Saints got a lot of success there. And then the zone replay looked very like Jared Goff on Sunday. But obviously he's very very light on his feet, and that's a big part of his game. And then, when push came to shove, Love threw some lovely kind of sideline balls that only his guys could go and get, and some of them were spectacular one-handed catches, but Love was the guy making those plays. And I don't know if you have anything to add to any of those observations from Sunday?
Did you do offense and defense?
Just offense.
Not a great deal. All I'll say is you can see it's a young offense in transition. Like, a lot of the skill players now are young guys. Musgrave is new in there. Love is a new starter. The wide receivers are all pretty much in the first 2 years. So it's growing pains for teams as they learn their identity and what they're trying to do. So, but just like inside of that, you can see the glimpses. You can see the flashes of what it could be, which is the thing. But overall, I thought the Saints, as fraudulent as they are, coped with them well on the occasion. I think they sort of figured them out early as how to really stop them. Like you say, they have to try and use the pass to open up the run, so they got quite aggressive against the pass. So they weren't able to do that, and it took a fourth quarter adjustment for it to happen. So you can see the good and the bad of having a young offense in there, and I say you'll have, and we know that better than anybody, having a young team, the pitfalls and the highs that come with it.
Peter, I know that my approach was kind of a bit scattergun and all over the place, just because it was kind of, what's the word? I've completely chronological in the game. But did any of what I was saying there ring true to you, Jordan? When he throws it, it kind of hangs in the air a bit.
Yeah, I don't. I'm okay with that. I don't really see too much of that. Okay. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with having to use the pass to try and set up the run, right? And that's a problem, right? They would like to run the ball. There's no question about it that LaFleur, back from his days in Tennessee, would like to run the football, right? And what they're ending up doing to a certain degree is they're throwing some long passes, like the one that went into triple coverage, which was a horrible throw to have to make, right? That presumably was the called play from the sideline. But a lot of that is about, I want to get them safeties back because I can't have 8 men in the box, because we need to be able to run the football, and we need to be able to run those underneath routes. And until we get those two safeties back, we can't do that. And that's why I think that they've thrown a higher percentage of deep passes. I think that Love's average throwing length is the deepest of all the starting quarterbacks in the NFL thus far. I think a lot of that is because the running game's not working, and they're trying to get those safeties to drop deeper. Yes, he needs to work on his accuracy. I think that's going to come. Like I say, the decision making has been good. He invariably throws to the right guy, not every time, but invariably throws to the right guy. But the accuracy does need some work. So yeah, there's absolutely plenty to work on for a team that's 2-1, and that's the encouraging thing about it, is you're 2-1 and you can still pick out whole reams of stuff where you can improve. But I think for me, so much of it starts with that running game. Even if you're not running for 150 yards a game, you've got to run for 90, 100 yards a game at 4 yards a pop and keep defenses are honest. And they're not at that point yet. And whether Aaron Jones makes that difference, makes that spark this week, we shall see. But yeah, I'm encouraged. I'm really encouraged because they haven't put up huge numbers. They haven't been consistent throughout a whole game, and yet they're still 2-1 of them, and they've made the plays pretty much when they had to have them. And it's kind of the last 2 weeks have been kind of tell us everything about the NFL. Because to a degree, the Packers were the better team against the Falcons for 3/4 of that game and lost.
Mm.
And they were undoubtedly second best this past week and won. And I think that just goes to show in the NFL that unless you put teams away, whether you're, the Packers 2 weeks ago or the Saints this week, unless you put teams away, you're always in danger of losing games that you should win.
Yeah, so let's move on to defense and special teams observations from Sunday. Kenny Clark on the first series absolutely bullied Eric McCoy for a really lovely sack. Seemed that you were very aggressive on defense basically all day, dominated their O-line for the most part, I thought. Your coverage, generally speaking, was excellent, and I think sometimes it was just their pass catchers being better in some key moments. So for the Graham touchdown early, Rasul Douglas's coverage couldn't have been better. He was right in, touch tight on him, and sometimes big man just wins. And there was a catch by Olave down the sideline, which was one-handed, but the coverage, again, couldn't have been better. So sometimes the offense just wins. Rashawn Gary had an incredible day. On third down, on any sort of obvious passing distance, he was an absolute menace all day. It seemed like you gave up maybe, and I don't know if this is scheme, but just short passes, and you didn't really worry too much about that. If they're at 2nd and 6 or 2nd and 7, you seem to just be willing to accept that, and you don't want to give up anything too deep. I think that's pretty much it for defense. Special teams, early on it seemed fine. Good punting and punt returning early, and then obviously the 76-yard touchdown by Rashid Shaheed was not the best coverage in the world. And then New Orleans, I don't think there's anything you guys did for the missed kick, but that kind of won you the game for special teams. Let's go defense first. And I mean, it seemed like you guys in coverage just had a great day, and there were just a couple of plays where like I say, the offense just sometimes wins, even if it's absolutely perfect, and otherwise your D-line was overwhelming at times.
Yeah, and it's an important point you make about, the other guys get paid too. And Packers fans have been quite critical, generalizing now, but been quite critical of the defense and giving up, 7 yards on first down or dropping off and giving a 10-yard cushion on 3rd and 5 and that kind of thing. The Packers fans have been quite critical of that. But generally speaking, the defense has played well this year without being dominating, right? But a lot of that does start up front, and with Alexander out, that corner spot is a real concern because it's a concern anyway. Stokes is out, Carrington Valentine's hurt, Alexander may or may not play, so yeah, it definitely starts with the front seven. Now, you mentioned passes in the flat, so that was another area where the Packers do give up yards, and it's a criticism to a degree. I don't know whether it's scheme or whether it's players, but the inside linebackers don't get out to cover those backs. So certainly Quay Walker, I think, had a horrendously low PFF grade this past week, having had a high grade the previous week for 17 tackles. And it's because, there were a lot of short passes out in the flat where, you're basically giving up 4, 5, 6, 7 yards before the play gets underway. The guy's not covered or there's a huge cushion. And that would be a concern for me, for the Packers, particularly with Jahmyr Gibbs on your team, right? That would be a huge area where if I was Detroit, I would be absolutely exploiting that. Now, that may be something obviously that you'd expect the Packers to work on this week, but we shall see. But yeah, I think this defense has been, I don't want to call it bend but not break. but it has still given up a fair number of yards. I think it's right in the middle of the pack-ish for yards given up. But it's got off the field when it's pretty much when it's had to. And the team as a whole has been helped by the turnover ratio. So the Packers have only turned the ball over once this whole season, whereas they've forced some turnovers on defense, and they've not given up. I might be wrong, but they don't appear to have given up at least many big plays on defense. So it's kind of, that feels like bend but don't break. That's not really the way the defense is designed, but yeah, they've made plays when they've had to have them, I guess is the way of describing that. How long that can last remains to be seen.
And special teams have always been a bit of a thorn in your side, like punt and kick coverage especially. You've given up probably more than most in terms of points or field position there. Has that kind of recovered apart from that punt return touchdown?
Yeah, it's an odd one because last year's, generally speaking, special teams were good. They got Rich Bisaccia in, the ex-Raiders coach, coaching the special teams, and they've been good with him there. But this season, they've had so they had that punt return given up for a touchdown this week. In the first week of the season, they had a delay of game penalty on what should have been a field goal attempt, and they ended up punting early in the game. So there's been one or two things on special teams that you'd like to tidy up. But we can't complain. The kicker's made every kick so far, which has surprised some of us. And like I say, he's got a huge leg, which is important at Lambeau. And the punter's been good. And it was a surprise, not because he doesn't have a huge leg, but because O'Donnell was as much there as the holder as the punter. So Whelan's having to learn that job as the holder, and touchwood so far he's been pretty good. So again, they've gone young on special teams like the rest of the team, and thus far, really barring that faux pas on Sunday, it's been okay.
And did you have any thoughts about the defense on Sunday for the Packers?
Yeah, well, it's kind of more of it's about Sunday, but the season in general. So there's one thing that really worries me about this defense with them in pertains to us. And I've talked about this for years with the Packers. Obviously, they had trouble with linebackers for years, but there was one other place where you could always guarantee there was a bit of a weakness in there, and that was the guy next to Kenny Clark in that front seven. Kenny Clark I love him. He's the best nose tackle in the NFL, bar none. But for years, they've just put in a load of nobodies next to him, and he's not had that much help in the interior, and he's still been great. Devontae Wyatt's starting to get good now. Like, he had a bad year last year, and because I was terrified when they took him that he might be that piece they've been missing there, and you've seen it this season now, especially against the Bears. And I know they're not really the standard bearer of offensive lines, but over the 3 games, he looks a lot better, and that's causing massive issues now. Because whereas before you could kind of double team Kenny and sort of the other guy one-on-one, that's fine. Devontae Wyatt's commanding more attention now. It means that Kenny Wyatt's been able to collapse. Kenny has been able to collapse the pocket more. Devontae's in there helping him, and what that's doing with the edge rushers now, Gary's healthy again, and you've got all these other guys. You saw it against the Saints. It's collapsing offensive lines. You mentioned the Ryan Ramczyk play. He's one of the best right tackles in the NFL, and they ate him alive. Because that defensive line's getting so much pressure now. Because on the interior, they are just collapsing stuff. It's something they've not been able to do for a long time with just Kenny Clark in there. And that concerns me because, like, our offensive line's banged up. Hopefully Taylor plays, but if he doesn't, like, that right-hand side of the line is vulnerable. And with them exerting so much pressure in there, it can collapse the line. And I've noticed that with this team this year. Kenny Clark's getting more opportunities because Devontae Wyatt is getting good. And that is a big concern. Because even then, if their secondary is in trouble and it's rinsed, you ain't got time in the pocket to sit there and target it. You're having to go at the linebackers, and the linebackers are getting better there now. Key Walker's getting better. Devondre Campbell's really good, and I think he's hurt. But you see the point. It's that front seven is just dictating the play. And, that's what I've seen with this defense. Wyatt has just solved a big problem for them there, and that's causing big problems for other teams. And Rashawn Gary doesn't look like he's lost a lot either. And Igbari's stepping up. This is what I mean. The depth on that line, that is the big question about this one. That's how we've got to go about beating them, is by somehow nullifying the pressure of that line. And it's impressive.
You've hit the nail on the head for me in terms of the key matchups. The first one I had was Clark, Wyatt and Gary versus banged up offensive line of the Lions. I mean, even if Decker is back, he's clearly struggling big time at left tackle. Sewell moves over to left tackle and for him had a really bad game on Thursday, giving penalties away left, right and centre, got beat on a few plays by why does his name escape me? Calais Campbell, who ate him for breakfast a few times. Moving him around from right tackle to left and back again can't be good for his confidence. And then you've got Graham Glasgow, who's going to be starting in place of Halapoulivaati Vaitane. He quitted himself quite well on Thursday, but there was a reason why Denver let him go, and is he going to find his Detroit form from years past? So it's a banged up Lions offensive line, even if we get players back from injury. And in Wyatt, Gary and Clark, you've got three absolute monsters, lads. So, who's going to come out on top in that matchup might decide the game.
You don't even mention Preston Smith or Kingsley Igbari. They're just a unit that works together, and say any good defensive line starts by collapsing the interior. Because the more resources you have to put towards stopping that, the less you've got to defend the edge. And when you've got edge rushers like they have, you can't ignore them. You can't put them one-on-one with rookie tackles or anything. So, yeah, it's a big problem. And it's what they're based on. It's why you can protect a weakened secondary if it's that dominant.
Yeah, Peter, who do you think comes out on top in that matchup in this game when it's all said and done?
Well, I think it depends. I think it depends on if Decker plays, all right, and how close to 100% he is, right. So there's no question in my mind that when the Lions' offensive line is fully healthy, it's one of the best in this league, and they have the ability to. I think it's too much to say that you're always going to nullify a pass rush or whatever else, because there's ways of getting to the quarterback. But as you alluded to, it's do you have to send 7 guys or 8 guys or even 9 guys to get to the quarterback, and that leaves you open then. So I think for me, for that matchup, it's absolutely dependent on if Decker plays. Assuming that he plays, then I think that matchup is kind of a push. I think that's kind of a 50-50 situation. And I think if you're the Lions, I think you play smart football, right? So you get it quickly out to the tight end, you get it out to the backs in the flat, you get it into Gibbs's hands and let him make plays, right? Don't sit back there. And I actually like so Jared Goff is one of those underrated quarterbacks, right? Everybody wants to get on his back, and he's not this and he's not that. He's a lot damn better than people give him credit for, right? And he's smart. Yeah. He was going to throw the odd pick here and there. What quarterback doesn't, right? But he's smart. He's an excellent ball handler, and he makes good decisions. He does make good decisions, right? So I think that Goff is better than people give credit for, and for me, for the Lions, you nullify that pass rush by getting the ball out of there quickly. 1, 2, 3, get the ball out, and that also applies for the Packers. By the way, I think Jordan Love has actually been at his best when either they've got him on the move or he's taken a 3-step drop and got the ball out of there. I don't want to see him hanging around back there, bringing on the pressure. So I think it's a 50. I think that's a 50-50 matchup in this game.
I think at some point people are going to catch up to Jared Goff not being a bad quarterback, like he's kind of termed, jettisoned from the Rams. We've talked about this. I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear ad nauseum, but this year he's 5th in passer rating and 4th in QBR. And yes, that's stats and can be massaged, but he also did that last year. And I think when you do it year to year, sometimes eventually the reputation has to catch up with your results.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that But people, some people look at quarterbacks and think if they're not Patrick Mahomes or they're not, pick whoever your favorite quarterback is, if they're not that
Tua
guy,
right now.
then they're not very good, and that's not the case, right? And lots of Super Bowls have been won by quarterbacks who are not, if you like, a Patrick Mahomes or a Joe Montana or whatever. You don't have to have that guy to win the Super Bowl. What you do have to have, you have to have a smart player that can throw the football and make the right decisions. And added to that, Goff is a good super ball handler as well. And he's led the Rams to the Super Bowl, right? And you can say, oh, it's McVay or it's this or whatever. I don't care. He was good enough to lead a team to the Super Bowl. They probably should have won, by the way. So, I think that he's just one of those guys that is just better than advertised.
Coming on to my second key matchup of the game, and we mentioned the Packers' interior of the offensive line earlier, and perhaps this is slightly, and I don't want to say weakness on weakness, but the Lions' interior of the defensive line has been iffy for some years, and Aleem McNeil was threatened to break out, had a great game on Sunday, and had some good games down the stretch last year. It looks like he might be coming into something. Benito Jones got a sack last week, but he's been up and down. Buggs was out the first game. There's a healthy scratch, but he's going to be the other guy who's going to rotate in, and we've got Levi Onwuzurike back there too. I would say none of them are in the sort of class of a Kenny Clark or Devontae Wyatt, and it's going up a Packers interior who have given up things. So I think, if the Lions can make the most of that matchup, that's going to go some way to disrupting Jordan Love and forcing him out of the pocket. But of course, he does quite well doing that. But, if the interior of the Packers offensive line holds up because we don't do anything there, because it's perhaps not a strength of ours, then that is going to play a big part in a possible Packers victory.
I mean, for me, if the Packers can't run the football, they can't win this game. It's as simple as that, right? And so I think the onus on the interior of the Packers line is huge. They have to pick up yards on the ground. And like I said earlier, this doesn't have to be a 150 or 200 yard rushing day, but it does need to be close to 100 yards at 4 or 5 yards a pop. Absolutely. If they can't do that, they can't win this game, in my view. And that's why I think the matchup you've described might well be the biggest matchup in this game. The Packers run blocking versus the Lions line.
And do you agree? Big, important matchup?
I think you could extend it for the entire line versus the entire line. I think you've got to win the trench sort of outright. That's what we did against the Falcons. You collapse the interior, you get the pressure on the edge against these guys. And, we've seen against the Falcons, they had rubbish tackles and we didn't really exploit that. You can protect parts of the line. You've got to dominate all over here, and Glenn's got to do what he did against the Falcons. It's not just these guys on the line. It's not just Aleem and Benito and guys like this. It's using your weapons in the backfield, like you're using Barnes. Barnes has been one of the best defenders on the teams this year because they're finally using him as a blitzer. They're finally using him. The reason we drafted him out of Purdue was to get into the backfield and make negative plays. When you're bringing him up and blitzing him, you're causing pressure on offensive lines to crack. That's when these gaps for these guys appear. We brought the corner blitzers up more, the safety blitzers up more. Bringing Branch in. Branch is going to be huge in this. Barnes is going to be huge in this. Bring these guys in to help out because I think our interior is decent. I think it's just not had the support it needs. Certainly Aleem hasn't. Aleem's a high-level defensive tackle, but he's been asked to play a ridiculously high number of snaps, which you can't do there because these are big guys. You can't just send them in there 60 snaps a game all the time and expect them to be great. He's had no one in there to help him. And, we've struggled there, but now you've seen like Benito's come into the show and he's helping out in there. And now, like with Kenny and Devontae Wyatt, now there's a guy in there to help him. You're getting more opportunities and you're seeing what he can do and you're lessening his workload. So he's fresher. We got Bugs back in there as well now, so you can help out. So it's the whole line has to work in unison. You have to work out the weak spot and overload it. And we got the guys to do it. So it absolutely is a big matchup. Our D-line has to be great Because if it isn't, then you get into the second two levels of the defense, and it's not. And we've seen what happens. So it's up all on the D line here. But Aaron Glenn did it right against the Falcons. Overload them, and we've got the guys to go in there and overload. And if it means rushing branch through the interior while the guys are holding it, do it. Put a big bullseye on it. If it means putting it through the edge, targeting the tackles as well. Even though they're strong, you're still going to target them. So the whole line has to do great.
Next matchup I had was wide receiver 2 for the Packers, be it Reed or Dobbs, against Jerry Jacobs. Now, Jerry's been the subject of some really harsh criticism with the start of this season, the UDFA from 2021 and 2021 for Jacobs. Yeah,
third year now.
Yeah, so he has obviously battled his way onto the team. He started much of last year. He's starting this year as well. He's not had the best shake of it. He's given up some poor penalties. He's been good against the run, I do think, but in coverage he's given up a few DPIs. He's just been a bit aggressive with his hands. And in Reed and Dobbs, you've got 2 wide receivers. He's going to have to cover one of them, and they've both been quite productive so far. It feels like the Packers really could exploit that matchup.
Yeah, and I think that in time, Jaden Reed may turn out to be the best all round receiver on the Packers team. All right, so but we'll see how that goes as the season goes. But because he can do so much, right, and he was the same in college. Back to when he started his college career at Western Michigan before he went to MSU. He can go deep. He can run slants. He can run hitches. You can use him on reverses and ends arounds. He'll return punts. Does lots of things for the Packers, and I think he's just going to become more and more productive as the season goes on. Now, none of them have got perfect hands, so there's been a few drops so far for the Packers through 3 games. 1 or 2 crucial drops as well. But it's an area that's interesting because it's one that we probably felt was, I don't want to say a weakness, but had huge question marks for the Packers going into this season, right? Because particularly with Watson injured, but even with Watson there, we're past the days of a Devontae Adams, and before that the Jordy Nelsons and the Donald Drivers of this world. And so none of us quite knew coming into this season where this group was going to be, and I think it's fair to say this group has so far been better than any of us really could have hoped for, without one of them being, huge so far. They've all been good. So I would absolutely expect whoever is covering Reed is going to have a tough day. And so if Jacobs has struggled so far, I think it's going to be tough. Having said that, again, for me, it comes back to the running game, because if the Packers cannot run the football, then you're just going to drop more guys into coverage, and that's going to cause immense problems for the Packers passing game. But yeah, I mean, that's certainly a matchup, as you've described, that one that the Packers will be looking to exploit.
And do you agree that feels like a potential matchup to exploit for Green Bay?
I would actually say Musgrave's the one I'm concerned about. We have not done well with tight ends like in forever and a day, and his physical makeup, 6'6", 250 pounds. He's getting a lot of usage so far. They're not shy to throw at him, and to get, our linebackers are bad in coverage. Like, apart from Campbell, unless you're going to play, Campbell's going to play a big part in this game. I think Campbell versus Musgrave is going to be a big battle in this. If we can get Jack in there and nullify the threat of the big tight end, take away the safety net passes for Jordan Love, that's going to be huge, because we've not come up against, I would say we've not come up against a tight end as good as him so far this year. Pitts ain't a tight end, he's a wide receiver, and they use him as such. He doesn't count. Musgrave's the prototypical guy we've really struggled against. And we've struggled against Green Bay and their tight ends for a long time now as well. And it's always a matchup they've exploited against us. So sorry, go on, Peter.
No, I was going to say that it's just really interesting that I think that applies in reverse as well. The Packers have struggled to cover tight ends for a long time. And so it's almost a mirror image situation there with Sam Laporta and probably Quay Walker having to cover him. So that's an interesting kind of see how those two things pan out.
It is, yeah, and we've drafted Campbell to deal with guys like Musgrave. Like this is why he's here. You've seen his ability in coverage so far. It's been really good, and he's got the physical build to be able to deal with him as well. I wouldn't trust Barnes or Rodrigo on him. I love Rodrigo, but guys like 2 foot bigger than him. So it's that for me is the big one. The receivers, I respect the receivers, but the tight end is what will kill us. And the tight end is what gives Jordan Love his easy outs, like to give him confidence and to get the ball moving down the field. So that's huge. You keep Musgrave quiet, then you're in business.
Other final matchup I had before we go on to keys to victory in the score prediction is Amon-Ra St. Brown versus whatever poor soul has that assignment. I presume Rasul Douglas might be the one to take him, especially if Jair's out. I mean, there doesn't seem to be any slowing him down really since game 8 of last year. Year before last. He's just been on an absolute tear. The only thing that's going to hurt him is not getting on the field. Peter, do you think that you've got a shot of slowing him down? Because we talked about this yesterday when we were reviewing Sunday's game. He didn't seem to do much on Sunday, but he got over 100 yards. And it's like, how do you do that and be low-key? I don't get it.
Well, and I think that, I mean, obviously the big question mark is whether Jair Alexander plays, right? So that we don't know. I have a feeling he won't play. I have a feeling it's probably too early, but we'll see. But I'm actually okay with Rasul Douglas being on Amon-Ra St. Brown as well, right? So Douglas is an underrated corner. He's tough.
Oh yeah,
plays the football, right? Will make plays, and he's smart, right? Now I think you have to look at when you get into the upper echelon of wide receivers in this league, they're going to make their catches. They are, right? This is a passing league, and those guys. You know, an Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to catch 6, 7, 8, 9 balls, however many, but he's going to make those. He is, you know, that's, you know, barring an injury or some unforeseen circumstances, those guys will make their catches. What's important is they don't make catches that kill you, right? So you can give up 8 catches for 90 yards. What you can't give up is 10 catches for 200 yards, right? And thus far, the Packers have been really good about not giving up the big play. Now, with Alexander out, if he again, I'm making that assumption that he's out, and Carrington Valentine potentially out, I think it's big area of concern for the Packers. The Packers' safeties can be exploited deep. They haven't yet been this season, right? But Savage is better playing closer to the line of scrimmage than he is deep. That would be a concern for me. So yes, it's an area I think the Lions can exploit. The only thing I could say is thus far, the Packers defense hasn't given up that big play.
And Amon-Ra St. Brown, I mean, it doesn't seem like there's anyone stopping that train.
No, I think, you know, just to maybe make this a little bit more broader, it's hitting that middle part of the field for us, which is going to be big. Because, I mean, you look at how we beat the Packers last year. You know, we used a lot of Swift and a lot of St. Brown. Like, they got like the most, I think they were the ones who got the 2 most receptions on the day. And what we were doing, you know, you were getting Swift out into space on the edge, which we'll do with Gibbs this time. You're hitting Amon-Ra down the middle. We've got Laporta this time to hit down the middle. And then what that does, it brings the safeties up. Like, as has been said, you bring them up a little bit. And then we were hitting deep bombs to Khalif Raymond, like slipping him in the back, opening up that part of the field for us to take the big shots there. So you've got to do that again. It worked very well for us. Use your playmakers in the short and intermediate, bring the defense up and then hit them with the deep guy. So that's a really big thing for us because, you know, like I say, it's how we did it last time. And the great thing about the usage of our players so far this year, like Reynolds has had 2 games where he's been great, and then Laporta's had a game. We're spreading it out. We're not giving it away. You know, a certain day, a certain player is going to come in. It's very hard to defend against. You don't know who's going to be the flavor of the day, but they're finding the matchups. They're exploiting them. Amon-Ra will be big, but that middle portion of the field taking the defensive line out the play quite quickly allows you to hit the deep ball on them. So it's big for sure. If we can exploit that, then we can put points down on them. But you've got to take that D-line out of the equation. And guys like Amon-Ra and Gibbs will hopefully do that for us.
Moving on to keys to victory, Peter, and you've, I think, alluded to one in particular already for the Packers in terms of running the ball. But if the Packers are going to win the game, what does it look like? Why is that going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, from the Packers' perspective, they have to. Yeah, I'm beating the whatever here, the dead horse, whatever. But the Packers have to run the football, right? They have to be effective in running the football. They have to not have penalties that put them, behind the down and distance, because they had 11 penalties this past weekend. They ended up in lots of 2nd and 15. 1st and 20 situations. They can't do that. They cannot be in that scenario. And like most NFL games, they have to win the turnover battle, right? Which is, I would suggest, probably the primary reason the Packers are 2-1 right now rather than 1-2 is that they've won the turnover battle this season, right? So for me, those are the 3 keys for the Packers. The fourth one is, it's a key, but it's more of a question mark, is what is the injury situation come game day? Because the Packers are really badly beaten up, right? And on the offensive line, they're beaten up. If Alexander can't go, we don't know the situation with Campbell. That they've got. That's a key for the Packers. If all of those guys can't go, then it's very difficult to foresee the Packers winning.
And on the Lions side, if the Lions are going to win here, what are their keys?
They've got to play complementary football for a full game. You saw with the Saints, they played complementary football for a few quarters, but then, they just slipped. The offense stopped scoring. The defense then had too much in on there, allowed them back in the game. This Packers team is injured. It's not got the Hall of Fame quarterback leading them at the minute, but it is still dangerous. And as Peter said, if you don't put them away, they will bite you back. So we've seen our defense have a great week against the Falcons. We saw the offense play really well against the Seahawks, minus the turnovers in there. But for the most part, they've been moving the ball really well. Those two sides of the ball need to come together as one at Lambeau, because if you want to be respected as the king in the NFC North, if you want to go out there and say, this is our crown now, nothing less than a perfect performance on both sides of the ball is in order to ensure that you do. And you want to put a statement out there to say, this is no fluke, we are just that good. So, be consistent throughout the entire game and just be prepared for a hell of a fight, because the Packers will not give up easy. They're at home. It's their turf. They used to run in this conference, and they want to show that even with Aaron Rodgers gone, it's still their division. So be prepared for the fight of your life. Play the best game that you can.
Just to interrupt with the practice report for the Lions, basically no change apart from Jason Kabinda has been downgraded to no practice today. Everyone else, as you were, Frank Ragnow, did practice in full today. So everyone else who was limited before is limited again. Just to weigh in for myself on keys to victory, for me, it's going to come down to some ancillary players making big contributions. So I anticipate Amon-Ra getting double teams, and that, you try and mark him out of the game. And like we were saying, perhaps it's not successful, but I feel like you kind of have to do that. And I mean, we only targeted 4 receivers. And if you take out the one target to Jameer on Sunday, we only targeted 3 receivers, including a tight end on Sunday. So I'm looking for someone like Khalif Raymond or Josh Reynolds to have a big day, because without that, I think we might struggle to progress the ball in the running game. And with all the in the past game, with all the running struggles we've had this season so far, with Gibbs going up the middle and Montgomery probably back, maybe back, or hopefully he can to take the inside runs, because it doesn't look like Gibbs' strength is that. And I don't think he was awful on Sunday doing that, but clearly his strength is outside. So I'd love to see one of Raymond and Reynolds have a big day. The other one is Brock Wright, who we haven't seen much of so far this season, but I'd like to see him get involved. when he's been given the opportunity to make a play, he's done that in the last couple of years, and we haven't really given him the chance this season. So I'd like to see him be someone who kind of just doesn't get noticed, to have that little chip off the line from the tight end position and release into the flat. And that could be a thing. We've identified that in the flat is something that the Packers don't really worry about too much. And so Brock Wright is a guy I'm kind of zeroing in on as someone who could exploit that. Let's come on to the score prediction. Peter, what do you think's going to be the score?
So I think on paper this is a very close game, right? So I think that coming into the season, I certainly felt that the Lions were the best team in the NFC North. I've seen nothing that changes that at this point in time. I think the Packers are about where we would have expected them to be, perhaps slightly better, but about where we would have expected them to be. So that to me still says the Lions are the better team. Now it's at Lambeau. There's going to be a tremendous atmosphere on a Thursday night game. However, and this really pains me because nobody wants the Packers to win more than I do. I don't think the Packers can overcome the lack of a running game and the potential injuries that they've got. And I think the Lions win this game by a score, maybe 7 points.
And what do
that pains me. That absolutely pains me.
I feel it very much.
But that's my honest view.
And what about you? What do you think the score's going to be on Thursday?
See, I'm with Peter in that I think it's going to be a score. I don't see no blowout either way here. This is, I agree. I think on paper we are the better team, but we have the mentality issues. Like we've got to prove ourselves on the biggest stage when they do it all the time. That's still the nagging thing back there. But to me, this genuinely feels like a passing of the torch moment where we finally sort of say we're here now and we are for real. And we need a statement win somewhere along the line in the division. And I think this is going to be it, because I think, the offense, we have the weapons to make. If the offensive line's banged up, we have the versatile weapons to get it out wide. We've got guys who like to pull on the offensive line. You can set the screens. You can kind of negate that defensive line to a degree, to a point where you can still score points. And I think the defense is starting to figure it out now. I do. The defensive line can carry on doing what it was doing. If we carry on being aggressive and overloading their weak areas, especially in that interior, you can stop the run game and you can get after Love. And with Campbell, I think you've got a perfect antidote to the big body tight end who'd hit us over the years. I just think this is our time. So for me, it's going to be like a low scorer like last year. I think it was 20-16. I think this is going to be like 23-16 to us. I think it's going to be very gritty. I think it's going to be very hard fought, and it's going to come right down to the wire. But this team, for me, is ready now to do it after last week.
Yeah, I'm in a very similar boat. I don't think this game breaks 40 points. I think that the over-under is way too high on this game. It just doesn't seem to me like these defenses are going to allow on either side a huge number of points. We just held Atlanta to 6. And I mean, I know week to week that doesn't back itself up too often, but I don't see how the Packers are going to score points at a canter. And frankly, with the Packers defense, I don't see how we score points at a counter. So 21-17, 17-14, that sort of range sounds perfectly reasonable to me. I think it's going to be an exciting game for fans of both sides with, edgier seat, whatever kind of euphemism, seat your pants, or I don't know what I'm trying to say. But I think for a neutral, I think this is going to be a dull game. Maybe teams that kind of beat each other up and don't score a lot, potentially. But we shall see. I think that we're going to wrap up the audio pod part of the show and just take some questions. We've already had a couple come in. If you're in the YouTube and Twitch chats, get your questions in at Roar the Lions UK and we'll just answer them off the audio pod. I'm just going to sign off now for that. So our next show is going to be a live reaction show on Thursday night. Yes, we will be up. 1 a.m. start. Come and watch it with me and Ash on the call. I'm getting better with my score bug live thing, which looks better than it probably is. But good fun to do that. And then the review show on Friday. College podcast is on Wednesday. So 7 days in a row of Roar the Lions content. You got to come and watch us all the way through, and you can follow us on our socials on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Rural Lions UK, and the Facebook group for worldwide fans is Detroit Lions Fans UK, One Pride Worldwide. The website, ROTLUK.com. Subscribe and rate us 5 stars if you can. Anything you can do for that, much appreciated. Peter, last word for you on the show. Anything that you want to chat about? What have you been doing on the podcast recently?
Well, like you guys, we've been reviewing Packers games over the last few weeks. We've been doing some off the cuff stuff, a little bit of Packers history, and just enjoying where we are right now, because like I said, when the season started, we didn't quite know where this was going to go, and I think that we've at least matched our early season expectations, if not slightly beaten them. So, yeah, I think we're generally happy guys, and we'll see how we feel on Friday, I guess.
Remind me of the name of the podcast again, so the guys can find it.
AVG Cheese, average cheese.
Go and check them out, and check out the UK and Irish Packers as well. It's probably the most heavily supported UK fan group. I think UK and Irish fan group, or is one of the most fanatical anyway. This is very well supported, and it's probably the most well-run group I've seen. So if you haven't checked that out before, it's well worth doing. Thanks to Peter for being on the show. You guys on the audio pod, thank you very much for listening. If you want to see the Q&A, check it out on YouTube and Twitch after this. But for now, good luck on Thursday, Peter. Let's go Lions, One Pride.
Recording stopped.
All right. We have one question. I was slightly playing that up. But Kool-Aid Kid said, Ant, Matt and Peter, what are your cooking preferences and favourite dishes? It came out of nowhere, but I was like, that's fun to kind of have a fluffy question to finish. I mean, I don't know if you've obviously travelled a bit, Peter, so I don't know whether you have some favoured, perhaps American cuisine.
Well, so I have an awful sweet tooth, terrible sweet tooth. So for me, it's anything sweet. It's any dessert, anything with ice cream, anything with chocolate. It's all of that stuff that you shouldn't eat is my favorite. I'd rather have dessert than I would the main course, if I'm really honest.
I'm with you. As soon as you said that, I'm hearing Mississippi mud pie, and I don't know why. But
yeah.
Key lime's the way to go.
Yeah,
key lime's amazing. But
definitely.
No, for me, it's pasta's my bad thing. I just cook with pasta all the time, and I eat far too much of it. But it's great. You can put so much with it, so that's my thing. Not Italian though.
Jethro C saying cheesecake ? So yeah, I think that.
Oh, you had a perfect chance to say cheese there, Peter.
I missed it.
Oh,
it's gone.
It went over my head.
Weather forecast for the game, says Carlton Wood. I don't know at the moment.
It's meant to rain, isn't it? Didn't someone put it in the someone put it in our Discord earlier?
So at the moment, it is meant to be sunny. Rain Tuesday, Wednesday, heavy rain, and then Thursday's meant to be sun.
Also, slippy field.
Slippy field. It was so stark how many people were slipping over. Not just the Jordan Love 4th down throw, but everyone at a crucial moment just seemed to be losing their feet. I was astounded that they didn't do anything about it.
Yeah, it was odd.
What else have we got? Nigel Williamson saying jam, roly-poly and custard. He must be a Harry Redknapp fan. Harry Redknapp fan for sure.
Definitely British.
When are you next going over, Peter, to Lambeau?
I don't know. I don't have any plans this year. I was going to go out to the Falcons game a couple of weeks ago, but other plans got in the way. So I don't know. So my wife is American. She's actually from Houston. So we go over when we can, but I don't have any plans. That's the honest answer right now. Is I don't have any plans. So I don't know.
How are you finding DAZN? Are you a subscriber to DAZN to watch the games?
It's got better. Let's put it like this. I mean, I think the whole transition, if you want to call it that, was extremely difficult for lots of people, with all the teething problems and stuff that they've had. But yeah, it's I think it's gotten better. I don't know about
So-
you guys. Are you?
I've had no issues with it. Just the payments they were taking at the start were a pain in the ass, but since then it's been
Right.
fine. So
Yeah.
So someone said it's 65 there on Thursday, which is I think it's 18 or 19 hours, so it's mild. It's not bad.
Yeah, that's pretty
I
nice
take
Green
that.
Bay
That-
weather, really.
That's palatable weather for me. That is. When you start getting above 30 and 40, it's very unpalatable. Couldn't do that. Green Bay would be perfect for me. I would love, like, just in terms of temperature wise, Green Bay's perfect temperature for me.
But you're someone who went and vacationing in Iceland every year.
Vacation? You're not American. You say holiday. Don't be pandering to the chat here.
I say route now.
Yeah, and you say flowers when giving out praise, which we need to stop.
We're giving out cigars now. We're giving out cigars.
Yeah, I'm trying to stop them turning you American, Matthew. Just because there's a goalkeeper for the national team there that's got your name doesn't mean you have to take on all
Absolute
those
legend.
So I've got a question. I've got a question for you guys as Lions fans.
Uh-oh.
Do you naturally lean towards who? Michigan as your college team, or
Ant definitely
No.
doesn't.
No, I am the force of reason here. So because everyone's Michigan fans, or well, a lot of them are Michigan fans over there, there's a lot of rose-tinted views about the players there. So I'm the guy who has to be hypercritical, like on the other side of it, to try and bring people into check. So no, in a word, but I sort of support the teams where a lot of the my favorite drafted players have come from. So I'm an NC State fan sort of more than anything because there's just been so many great players come from there, and for our team as well. But I'm not a Michigan fan, no. Matt's been to the Big House, though.
Yeah, I've been to the Big House. I went to a game which consistently ranks in the top 10 of games to see this century or something, which was 2021 Michigan Ohio State, which was a really cool game. It was -4 degrees Celsius. It was snowing. Hutchinson got a few sacks. Stroud was on fire but couldn't get it done. That was really cool. And 300th game with more than 100,000 fans in attendance just blew my mind when I was there. So that was great. But I only went because I was watching Detroit for Thanksgiving, and that was the game afterwards. So I keep an eye on them because it's easy to go and watch a game when you go out to watch a Lions game. But I would do that for Michigan State or anyone else. I'm a kind of floating voter for whatever team kind of catches my eye that season. So last year that was UCLA. Just really love that story. I really thought there was an outside shot coming into the end of the season. They might make the playoffs. I mean, I think they had a gauntlet to run in the last 4 games, but they were unbeaten going into Oregon and whatever, and then it kind of fell apart. But DTR was my guy, and Zach Charbonnet and whatever, so I liked that. But, I mean, we've all kind of turned into slight Arkansas fans for Ant's KJ Jefferson, because he is just fun to watch, and I think that's the thing for me. If a team's fun to watch, I'm going to support you because I want to be happy.
I I like well-run college football teams, which are good and that. So because there's a lot that aren't, and there's some that are good. So
I would say that you're leaning towards Penn State as well this year.
I'm big on Penn State this year. Very, very big. I've said they'll win the Big Ten. They'll get to the playoffs. I stand by my assertions there after the first few weeks. Ohio State are not good this year. They really aren't.
You buying into the JJ McCarthy hype? Because he's played well against nobodies.
When he does it against great teams, I will be all in on him. When he's doing it against East Carolina, who had the 129th ranked passing defense in the nation last year, I'm sorry, I'm not. When he does it against Ohio State, when he does it against Penn State and these big teams, I'll absolutely be on him. I just don't make grand assumptions when they're playing these scrub non-con schedules.
What about you, Peter? Who is your college team? Or do you have one?
I'm not sure. I guess I'm a bit like you guys. I'm not sure I really have one. There are certain teams that I kind of lean towards, but I don't really have one. And I think part of that is because I spend so much time looking at players that you might have favorite players or whatever, and therefore you look for those teams. But I don't really think I have one. I mean, U of M, Michigan was one of the first college stadiums I went to. So that's kind of special to me, but it's not. I wouldn't say I'm a huge U of M fan. Yeah, I really don't have I really don't have one. I just like you guys. I just like good college football, and there's certain teams you like to see get beat, but
There's just certain stadiums and certain matchups that I want to go and watch. That's the bigger thing. I want to go to the Horseshoe because that just looks like it's going to be a cool place to go and watch football. Going and watching a Texas rivalry game would be really cool. Is it the Backyard Brawl this weekend or was that last week?
That was last week. That's been and gone.
So who's in that?
Pittsburgh and West Virginia.
Okay.
And I bet correctly on that game. I had West Virginia to win that, and they did. So I was quite proud of that.
Big call.
Well,
Yeah, in some ways it's more fun to watch, I think, college football. In a lot of ways, actually. The marching bands play a massive impact, and you don't really get it until you're there.
I do want to go and see live games there. It's like I want to go to Blacksburg for opening day just for that entrance, like alone. And then there's so many of the rivalry games I'd love to go and see. And I have to do a little tour almost. Like later in the season when you get games from Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, like just do like a week-long tour of college football games. That'd be awesome. I think I might have to look at doing that at some point.
Yeah, try and coincide a Detroit game and then fly to whatever college game's the best game in the slate.
Yeah, because as of next year, I can't remember who's doing it. But Matt go on Wednesday. Some teams, I think it's the CUSA starting Tuesdays next year. So you're gonna have games Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Oh Jesus!
So you can get a right slate out of that in November.
Monopolizing it. So we could go to a game on Tuesday, and then Thanksgiving for the Lions on Thursday, and then a college game on Sunday. Hit 3 games in 3 different places in a week, and then go home.
Yeah, basically could.
Sounds
if you
perfect.
can find them in a good, and there's plenty of teams around there to go and see. So
yeah, the Midwest has a huge concentration of teams.
go to Lambeau Field on the Sunday.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be good. Yeah.
Well, if the Lions are playing, go there.
Right. I think we might draw this one to a close. So, Peter, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, it's a great chat as always. And guys, I hope you'll join me in thanking our guests in the chats. And any final words before we sign off?
No, I think I'm good. I'm just getting nervous. This is the one. It's going to be very hard to palate a defeat from this one. So I'm just praying that this is it. You know, we've waited years for this moment to say we're on our way up. This is the time. So
biggest game of the regime.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say it's the biggest game of the regime. I do. So let's see how it goes.
I mean, Carlton's asked an interesting question just before we go. He said, "Did Peter give his opinion on the Vikings and Bears in division?" I mean, what can you say about our winningless teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Bears are what we thought they were. You know, I was slightly concerned going into week 1 because you never quite know week 1 how that's going to pan out, but they've turned out to be who we thought they were. And I think, to be honest, I think the Vikings are who we thought they were, right? So I don't think that the Vikings are well, they're clearly an 0-3 team, but I don't think they're an 0-3 team. But they're very one-dimensional, right? And I don't want to hear about quarterbacks that throw for 400 yards a game because you know what? Most of those quarterbacks that throw for 400 yards a game lose, right? They're throwing for 400 yards a game for a reason, right? So that's one of the least indicative stats in the whole of football. Once that passing yardage is that high, I think both of those teams are who we thought they were. I think Minnesota is better than 0-3, but I think it's the third team in this division.
Yeah, makes sense. Right. We're going to sign off now. So, guys, we'll see you tomorrow for the college show and on Thursday for the game itself. Have a great week. We'll see you then. Goodbye.
See you later.